Good. Happy morning, everyone. Excuse me. It is Brenda here for Stamplicity, and welcome to Fun Friday. All right, so today is going to be a quick one. Today I'm going to show you the Vicki Boutin Irresistibles and how they work. All right. So there's a bunch of product in this collection. And it is just amazing because you can custom colorize your projects now. All right. So I have a sample here. And this is a layout I have done with some of the elements on here. And I'll talk about them in a second. But the frames, the title, even this border on the side here, and I apologize because my layout got a little mangled with transportation from the show. But all of those are the Irresistibles, all right? So they started off white. And then we just add ink to them, all right? So I'm going to put this away for a second. I'll bring it back in a second. And let's talk about the products that are in the Irresistible family of products here. All right. So we have a bunch of different ones. I think there's three out. And these are the Irresistible rub-on transfers. These are really cool to put in your background. There are three 6 by 12 sheets in there and different designs. All right. So this one here is the Artful Layer rub-ons. All right, so there's also ones that have words, and I forget what the other one is, but anyways, they all work the same and are pretty awesome. All right, so those are the rub-on transfers, and I'll show you how to use those. Then we have the Irresistible die cut borders. All right, there's a whole lot in this pack. All right. So again, great for all your projects. All right. Whether you're a card maker or a layout person, albums, journal, these elements are going to fit in there. For those that are the longer ones here, you can trim them down for you card makers, but they all have a resist on them. All right. So there's a lot of goodness in that pack. And again, that is the die cut borders. And then there are the frames. All right, and again, a whole lot in the package here. And again, this can be used across all the different avenues you may take in terms of layouts, journals, card making as well. Lots of goodness in that one. And then finally, we have the chipboard words. All right. Now, the pink ones there, those have been done. All right. I demoed them on the weekend, but those are but they all start off as white. All right. And there's a whole lot. And they're that lovely scripty word or font or I guess it's handwriting from Vicki herself, but lots of different words in there. You also get a few hearts in there. All right, so let's see how they all work, and let's add some ink. All right, so I'm going to just start with the Irresistible die cut borders. I'm just going to go ahead and pull a couple of these out. What is cool about these is that you can, blend your inks on here. You can use multicolored ink. So I'm going to use that one, and let's grab this border. I don't know what that is. Oh, yep, I can see. All right, so those are, let's just start with this one here. Now I'm going to bring this up to the camera, and hopefully the camera will pick this up. There is a resist printed on there. It's like clear embossing almost, but not raised. All right, so hopefully the camera is picking, there we go. We got a little bit on there. So you can see the pattern. This is a ruler. All right. I just want to see if I can get that camera focused on there even more. Anyways, you can see slight reflections of it with the lighting. All right, so there's that. The butterfly, let's see if we can get a better, there we go. All right, you can see the resist on there. So the pattern of the butterfly and the pattern of the ruler is what is going to resist the ink. All right, so you can add watercolor to this, you can add inks to this. We're going to do I'll show you both ways with inks, and then I'll use the inks as watercolors. All right, so let's start with the ruler. And I'm going to grab my yellow inks here, and I'm using the same colors I used from What's Up Wednesday because they're still on my desk here. So I have two yellows here. All right, so, and I'm just going to grab a blending brush, and we're just going to pick up ink, and we're going to just apply it right over top of the border. All right, So I'm going to use 2 different colors of yellows just so we get different yellow tones on here. And the more intense the color that you put on, the more that resist is going to really pop out. All right. So I'm just adding some dark and yellow, or dark and light yellow on here. And I feel like I need to add a little bit of brown as well. So I'm going to go grab a brown ink. All right, but let me bring this up so far so you can kind of see what is happening. All right, now we can see that ruler pattern. All right, I love these because that means you can color or custom colorize your projects here. So if you were looking for, you know, a border and you wanted to match it up with the colors of your pattern paper, these would work. All right, I'm going to grab a little bit of brown. Let's dirty this one up a little bit. Salted caramel it will be. So you could use your distress inks, you can use your oxide inks, any blendable ink is going to work. All right, so I've just dirtied that up a little bit. So what I did find is that when you do this, I would have a clean cloth, paper towel. This is not so much a clean cloth, but I'm going to use it anyways. And then once you're done, I'm going to just rub it over top because that's just going to take any ink that's sitting on top of that resist off. All right. And just make it that much cleaner. All right. So let me just pull this up. And now let me see if the camera will focus. Now we've got this great little ruler border that we can use on a layout or a card. All right. So there is one of the borders, and let's find my little butterfly. And let's do him a multi-tone color with maybe that color, blue and a green. All right, so I think I'm going to just want some smaller brushes for this one so I can kind of do smaller areas. All right, so again, I'm not sure if the camera is getting into that detail there, but you can see that it's resisting that pattern. All right, so let's add the green on the bottom. And then I'm going to grab some of this blue and add that to the top and kind of blend those 2 colors together. So you can do all your blending. All right. It works. Now they do have kind of a distressed look to them as well. So, all right. So I've got the 2-tone going on there. And I'm going to grab my cloth. And I'm just going to buff off so that white really becomes white. Any excess ink is going to come off, and take a look how pretty that is. All right, so there is, those are the borders, all right, the die cut borders for that one. All right, so let's move on. I'm going to show you the next one, which is going to be the frames. And they work the same way. So let's just grab a couple of frames here. I love this because you get so much in a pack. All right, so let's do 2 frames here. Okay, so again, you can do multi-tone if you wanted to. I'm just going to carry on with the green here. I'll put a project together with these, so I'll keep my colors the same. All right, so again, you're just going to go ahead and blend that ink right on. All right, so this one has a little grid pattern on it. I'm going to add a little bit of blue on there as well. I love that you can blend on these. So I'm just going to do a little bit of blue in the opposite corners, and then we're just going to buff that off. All right. And now we've got a lovely little frame that's going to match that butterfly really, really nicely. All right, let's do the bigger frame. And this one here, I'm going to go back to the yellow, I believe. All right, that's colored, and I'm just going to buff. And it's really, this has got a little distressed pattern on there. All right, so you can kind of see. There we go. All right, so those are the frames. So they work the same way as the borders and such. All right, so let's carry on. And let's show you the chipboard words, because these go a little bit different. My towel keeps on falling onto the ground. All right, so these ones here, so the word itself is what's going to accept the ink, and the negative part of the word is what is going to be resist. All right, so I'm just going to grab one of this one. All right, so this one here is the word awesome. All right, so you can see the resist on there. So it's the opposite. The word is going to accept the ink, and everything else is going to resist it. All right, so let's go in with some blue on this one. All right, so when you do this, you'll see that it will just coat that whole thing in blue. All right, this is why you want to have a clean cloth for these ones, definitely. All right, the borders and all of that, I just do that just because there's excess ink there. You really don't need to wipe them clean, but these ones you really do. All right, so I'm going to bring this up, and you can see that I have ink everywhere on there. So then once you have it done and you're happy, then you can take your towel, cloth, whatever you're using, and then you're going to take off the excess, and that color is just going to remain now on the word. All right, now I'm using a really light blue. It's frosty, so it's very, very light. But look how awesome that is. No pun intended there. All right, so now you can custom color your titles to match your layouts or your projects. All right, so there is that. So those are the chipboard words. All right, now let's get into my favorite, which is the rub-ons. All right, so let me just get these all together. Look how pretty that looks. I mean, a really nice palette there that I'll be able to pull something together. But let's get into the rub-ons now. These are really, really cool and great for backgrounds. All right, so I can just grab, that's a better press paper. Let's grab a regular cardstock here, and let's take a look at the rub-ons now. Like I said, you're going to get 3 6x12 sheets in here. Each sheet is a little bit different. So if I flip this around, these are the ones that are in this package here. Okay. Okay, so now I still like to cut these out. So I'm going to take this lovely little pattern, which is almost a little too big for my card. Okay, so you can see the pattern in there. That's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to take the release sheet off the back, and then I'm going to position this kind of on the left-hand side. All right, now it's up to you how you apply your rub-ons. I am actually going to run it through my die cut machine here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. You could definitely use a rub-on tool or a bone folder to rub it on. I love using my die cut machine. All right, so it's going to go on. It's going to transfer on like a regular rub-on. All right, so you're just going to peel that off. Everything came off. All right, so now that is on my paper. All right, I had this little piece here. I'm just going to use this up in the top corner here. So let me just, whoops, let me just get that on, and then we're going to go ahead and do some inking over top of it. All right, so now we have, I forgot to say, there is a little, if you do double rub-ons on a piece, you'll notice I have little black flecks on there, all right? Because these resists have a little, almost like a stickiness to them. Anything that's on your plate, any paper fibers will stick to that. So you have to be mindful of that. Totally forgot about that, but anyways, learn from my lessons, all right? So if you're gonna do one rub-on, do it just once through your die cut machine. Don't do multiple rub-ons. Use your bone folder then. So all right, so let's go ahead and now add some color to this. So I'm going to use the blues and greens here just because they're here. And now when you go ahead and add this ink over top of it, this really resists it. All right, you can see how lovely that is. All right, so I'm going to grab the green. And we have a really great background now that we can now layer with things for our card. All right. So there's that. Now I'm going to spray some water on here, have some water droplets. The 49 Market inks are water reactive, so we can add some of that fun elements here and take off some of that ink. Okay, so I'm going to let that water do its thing. All right, you can see that starting to resist. And then I can build on top of my background here with either ephemera, laser cuts and such. All right, so let's see what I have in my collection to do that. I'm going to let that dry for just a few seconds, and then I'm going to blot it. All right, and we'll let that continue dry, but those are the rub-ons. All right, so I want to do a kind of a watercolor technique as well, just to show you that. So I'm going to grab one of the borders. All right, let's do this border here. So you could do watercolors as well. Do I have my watercolors handy? No, I don't know where they are. So I'm just going to use these as watercolors. So let's go ahead. I'm going to grab this one. Again, you could do this with distress ink as well. This is doll face. So I'm just going to add my ink right down on my glass mat. I'm going to add water to this. All right. And now you can do the dippy do. All right. And that is going to give you that ink on there as well. All right, but a different kind of look to it. All right, now you're going to get that kind of watercolor look. All right, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to clean up my mess here. All right, and let's add another color in there. Let's go with pineapple. Okay, so I just applied that to my ink, my mat, sprayed it with some water, and now I can do the dippy. Now I'm going to just spray this now and reactivate those inks on there so that they start blending together. And I am happy with the way that looks. So now I've got this kind of watercolored look on there. I'm going to let that dry, and the colors are just going to be just lovely because they start blending together. So now you're going to have some orange tones in there. So I probably have a little too much water on there. It's going to take a little to dry. Um, I don't know. Let's try. I don't know if I can take the heat tool to this, but we're going to try. Well, it looks like we can. I didn't know with the resist on there if I could do the heat. I have a lot of water on here. Oh my goodness. Okay, that's not completely dry, but most of it is. All right, so now we're going to get this lovely watercolor look, which is pretty awesome. All right, because these already have a distressed look to them, so it's really lovely with that watercolor. All right, so that is the Vicki Boutin Irresistibles. Just a fun little product to have, you know, some inky fun. And like I said, there are 3 different types of rub-on transfers with her Irresistibles. We have the frames, we have the die cut borders that I did not close up. And of course, we have the rub rub-ons. What am I missing? The words, but they fell behind my desk, so I can't show you that. So I'm just going to bring my layout here. So the frames on this layout were the Irresistibles. All right, so they all started, and I just added some blue ink. This one here, I did a two-tone kind of pink, and then the white. The word "so amazing" is the Irresistibles as well. And the border on the side here is an irresistible border. So a really great way to, I had leftover ephemera from, I think, the Flower Emporium line from Vicki Boutin. And I wanted the colors to match that. So that's where the pinks and the yellows came from. And then I needed to bring in some greens. So that's where the tag, because I wanted some leaves in there. And it all kind of really worked together. I added the blue just for a splash of a different color, but it turned out really, really fun and easy to do. All right, so that is it for Fun Friday for the Vicki Boutin Irresistibles. That's what they're all about. Super fun to play around with, and give them a try. All right, everyone, have yourself a wonderful day. We will talk to you soon. And until next time,